Hello guys, my name is Lars Stender. I'm a writer from Denmark who specializes in science fiction and fantasy. Today I'm here to read from my fantasy novel Mandigo and the Hellhounds. And if you want to know more about me and my work, please find me on Facebook. Mandigo and the Hellhounds, Chapter 59. Steel shines slashed. It's like a lightning blade through the magical barrier that was keeping Lady Arundel imprisoned. A deafening and crackling sound filled the underground chamber, and magical sparks sprang like wild shooting stars through the air and exploded whenever they hit something. Behind Mandigo, Greta was thrust violently backwards by Mortero's attack. She fell down with a painful moan, was drowned completely in all the noise from the destruction of the Elf Queen's prison. Mortero smiled triumphantly when he saw Greta fall. She had been easier to defeat than he had expected. He turned towards Mandigo, ready for the final battle with his rebellious nephew. But to his surprise, he wasn't immediately able to catch sight of Mandigo. The air was filled with smoke and sparks that faded only very slowly. Before Mortero had figured out where Mandigo was, something hit his right kneecap, and he collapsed, whining in pain. "There! Finally got you, you devil worshipper!" Mortar yelled as he swung the broom he had found once more. This time he hit Mortero squarely on the nose so hard that it broke. "Ouch! You confounded little beast!" Mortero cursed. He instinctively touched his face and tried to defend himself with his gift. He made a sweeping motion with his right arm, and Mortarton was thrown across the floor like a piece of paper hit by the brush of his big boom. With blood running from his nose and down his distinguished cloak, Mortero slowly got his back on his feet. He looked around for his enemies, and finally caught sight of Mandigo and Lady Arundel. As soon as the magical prison had been destroyed, the Elf Queen had fallen into the huge ditch that connected the two big dark tunnels openings at each end of the room. Mandigo had immediately jumped down to her to help her back up, and they had just managed to crawl out of the ditch when Mortero caught sight of them. "Oh, there you are!" Mortero cried as he lifted his arms to strike them. "Not so fast, brother dear. I'm still here," said Greta, who had also got back on her feet. She swung her wand, and as she did so, Mortero's legs were swept from under him by an invisible force, and he crashed on the floor, landing on his back. "Hurry!" Greta said to Mandigo and Lady Arundel. "Get out of here! I'll detain him." She swung her wand again, and this time Mortero was hurled backwards across the floor and down into the big ditch that Mandigo and Lady Arundel had just crawled out of. "We also have to take Mortarton with us," Mandigo said, as he looked for the brave little castle gnome while supporting the weakened Lady Arundel. "I don't see him," Greta said. However, despite her weakness, the Elf Queen was still able to locate Mortarton through her elf vision. "Over there, under the stairs," she said, pointing with a long finger. "I'll have to get him. Will you be all right?" Mandigo asked the Elf Queen. She nodded and smiled, so he dashed over to help his little friend. Mortarton sat under the stairs, shaking his bearded head. "Almighty Father of Mortarton, what a shake-up that was! It was even worse than the time I was hurled from the spire down from the West Tower during the hurricane of '64. "Hurry, Mortarton," Mandigo said. He lifted the castle gnome up and put him on his shoulder. "We've got to get out of here." "I say," Mortarton agreed as he clung to Mandigo, who ran back to Lady Arundel. But Mortero had other plans. "You are not going anywhere," he challenged angrily, and rose like a jack-in-the-rabbit box out of the ditch in the floor. With his blood-smeared face and disheveled hair, he looked like an inhabitant of the underworld himself. With his hands stretched out before him, he violently resumed his attack on Greta. The air itself seemed to shriek from the pain when his dark gift hit her like an anvil or an evil lance. And for a brief moment, she staggered backwards. But she had been prepared. She held her wand before her and with her own gift he formed an invisible but extremely strong shield of power. Magical lightning emerged in the sizzling space between brother and sister, and hammered against the walls and ceiling, causing the rock to crack. Everything flickered and shimmered. There was an intolerable tension in the room. Mandigo, Lady Arundel, and Mortarton had to give up sneaking out of the main entrance, because the air had practically been sucked out of their lungs. Both Greta's and Mortero's faces were contorted with discomfort and exertion. The skin on their hands and faces began to boil, and they were covered with blisters. Energy density in the air had risen to new heights, and Mandigo felt as though his head might explode. He screamed and fell to the ground. Blood was dripping from his nose and ears. Something had to give. When something finally did give, it was heralded with a split second of complete and utter silence, after which the world shattered like a mirror thrown against a granite hall. End of chapter.